Now to this, the woman who accuses Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax of sexual assault. She's speaking out about what she says happened inside a Boston hotel room at the Democratic National Convention in 2004. In a statement, Dr. Vanessa Tyson writes, quote, "What began as consensual kissing quickly turned into a sexual assault. Mr. Fairfax put his hand behind my neck and forcefully pushed my head towards his crotch." She then describes in graphic detail how Fairfax allegedly forced her to engage in oral sex. Utterly shocked and terrified, the statement continues, "I tried to move my head away but could not because his hand was holding down my neck and he was much stronger than me. I cannot believe, given my obvious distress, that Mr. Fairfax thought this forced sexual act was consensual. To be very clear, I did not want to engage in oral sex with Mr. Fairfax, and I never gave any form of consent." The lieutenant governor, who says the encounter was consensual, responded in a statement writing this: "Reading Dr. Tyson's account is painful. I have never done anything like what she suggests. Any review of the circumstances would support my account. But it is the truth, because it is the truth. I take this situation very seriously and continue to believe Dr. Tyson should be treated with respect. But I cannot agree to a description of events that is simply not true." All this as Virginia's lieutenant governor prepares for a legal battle with his accuser. Justin Fairfax has hired the same law firm that represented Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh during his Senate confirmation hearings. While the lieutenant governor's latest statement in response to Vanessa Tyson's sexual assault account says in part he wishes her, quote, "no harm or humiliation, nor do I seek to denigrate or diminish her voice." Two sources tell NBC News that Fairfax used profane language during a private meeting on Monday to describe her. Fairfax chief of staff acknowledged that the lieutenant governor's use of an expletive, but disputes that Fairfax used it to characterize Tyson. Wow. Well, this is emotionally charged. And how do we talk about it? He says that it did not happen. She is coming forward, and if you read, all the accounts leading up to this, she didn't want to come forward. She didn't want to put herself in this position, but has found herself in it. Putting on the table, it's very hard to understand why any woman would do this if it didn't happen. Having said that, who's to say it did? Anybody want to step forward?
I think we have to go through the same process where we can't pay judge and jury on this one. There will have to be some kind of an investigation, even if it is done privately, of who she spoke to at the time, who has she spoken to since about this incident. Has he spoken to anything? I think the words that he used in the meeting, although he says it doesn't apply to her, they were very clearly derogatory words towards a woman. Don't particularly boost his credibility in this case about the way he's speaking about this woman. His temperament.
Right.
But it happened in 2004, and it's and it gets to this idea
he was not in a position of power.
Do some men think that something is consensual when it's not?
Right.
There's that.
That's interesting.
Do men think, oh, she's kind of resisting but saying no, but actually I find that appealing, and I'm going to think that actually she means yes.
Or maybe she does.
Well, and so the problem right now, actually, that Democrats are facing is that by the time allegations of what Kavanaugh did as a 15-year-old, what he did as a 15-year-old led most Democrats on the Judiciary Committee to say that he was disqualified to be Supreme Court Justice. So what do Democrats do now with a guy who is a rising star in Democratic politics and would be a star on the stage for decades to come?
We have a lot of examples of the Democrats setting what everyone's calling now is a zero-tolerance policy, like what happened with Al Franken. And the real problem here is that, frankly, she seems pretty credible. She's a college professor. She's a Democrat. There's no, hidden political agenda here. And she told her story a long time ago. And like you said, Mika, she did not, by all accounts, want to come forward. They found her. Yes, this is something that happened a long time ago.
And she's been an advocate for victims of sexual abuse.
To your
along the
point,
years.
Caddy, there's going to have to be a broader investigation. And with these investigations, what we've seen is that there are other accounts. A lot of times when there is one
So
incident
who's
like
going
this,
to be
there are other
investigating it?
incidents.
Is it us?
Well, that's the
Should
thing.
this go to the court? Okay, Jonathan Capehart, go ahead.
So to the point of, excuse me, the expletive used in the meeting, as soon as it happened, I reached out to Governor Fairfax's people. So, whoa, what's going on?
Yeah.
And they vigorously denied that had happened, that he had used an expletive to describe Dr. Tyson. I have been talking to them since this story first came up a year ago. And this is different than the Kavanaugh, Dr. Blasey Ford situation. Dr. Ford at the time told people, she had a therapist, she told her husband. There were a lot of contemporaneous, what's the word I'm looking for, corroboration.
But we don't know yet.
Well, one second, because the Post had the story a year ago, didn't go with it because they could not corroborate her story or his story. This is literally a situation where they're both, as you said, Mika, rightly, they're two different versions of events. He's not saying this, that they never met, that they never had any kind of engagement. It's the, was it assault?
So there's
one more thing. Congressman Bobby Scott in the Post today reports that she told him, Dr. Tyson and Congressman Scott have been friends for a long time. She told him a year ago after she went to the Post. And it's unclear what he did with that information. When Dr. Blasey Ford went to her congresswoman acted. So to your point about who's going to investigate this, I don't know, but Dr. Tyson and Lieutenant Governor Fairfax each have their own lawyers, and I don't know where it goes from
I will
here.
say there's a journalistic standard, which you articulated correctly here, and then there's a political standard. And for the past year and a half, the political standard has been, we believe women, right?
Just stop for 1 second. Let's talk about that journalistic standard, because during Kavanaugh, and sometimes when you have scandal after scandal after scandal pile on top of each other, that journalistic standard is just brushed aside and ignored. It's just run over.
Right.
I mean, we can look back, and I hope somebody at a journalism school looks back at what happened during the Kavanaugh hearings and the low standards that a lot of journalists held themselves to and editors held themselves to, and what was published in a rush while the hearings were going on. There's a reason why the FBI needed more time to investigate, because, quite frankly, a lot of journalists put a lot of garbage out there.
Okay. That's fair. That's totally fair. And I think there is a lot of introspection that journalists should have about covering these things. And certainly we're trying to do our best, and oftentimes we don't do our best. I totally agree with that. My point was that there's a journalistic standard and then there's a political standard. And for the past year and a half, the mantra for Democrats was, we must believe women. And that was it. And what has been shocking to me to see, to Joe's point, is that in the wake of this allegation against Justin Fairfax at a very delicate political time in Virginia, the voices that have often been there saying believe women, have been really silent. We've reached out to every 2020er who's running right now to get a reaction to this. And up until very recently, they were incredibly silent, if not completely silent. We've reached out to leading feminist progressive institutions, people who have been at the forefront of the Me Too movement. They have said nothing.
Yeah.
And
You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of Monica Lewinsky, where you actually had feminists attacking Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah, no, and
it
that's
also reminds me of the
very interesting
2016 campaign. One of Hillary Clinton's biggest early missteps was when she said all women must be believed. And immediately she opened herself up to attacks on Bill Clinton. And so Democrats can't have a double standard any more than Republicans can have a double standard on race.
And what's interesting about the Monica example that you just pointed out is that there's been a lot of retrospective about Monica recently, including some really good podcasts about it. And to a person, feminist groups have said, man, we really shouldn't have done it that way. And we were not open-minded. And you would think that in a modern-day example of something similar happening, they would handle it differently. But it's been defined. This whole process has been defined by, we got to wait and we got to see. And I've talked to a couple people who said, you know what, her name's not out there, we got to wait, we got to see. Well, her name is out there. She's put out an incredibly moving and harrowing story about what happened to her that would, by any other standard, if it were Republican, cause howls. And what we've had is silence.
And while we talk about what happened in the Democratic Party and with politicians in terms of recognizing facts or respecting them, I'll say what happened in journalism during Kavanaugh, and now we'll see what happens here, is that there were many journalists speaking about this from the heart and taking contemporaneous facts, contemporaneous stories as fact. And that's where we, I think, got ourselves in a really difficult situation, because you got to cover the facts, not the accounts that we take as fact. Willie, there's more.
Yeah, there is. And Mika, I just want to go back to what you said at the beginning, which is that in the case of Dr. Vanessa Tyson, in the case of Dr. Ford, we talked about that in real time. It is an incredibly difficult thing for any woman to come forward and make public a story like this.
Yes.
Especially in a case like that. That goes for any woman who ever comes forward. But in a case like this, where people are going to be talking about you on TV, showing your face on TV, your name is going to become a household name, the details of your story will be online forever. It's doubly, triply, quadruply, exponentially more difficult for that to happen. So you cannot dispute fully what she says. You cannot dismiss the fact that she came forward even as a first step to taking her credibly.
Yeah, and as Jonathan mentioned, multiple reports allege that the woman accusing Lieutenant Governor Fairfax of sexual assault informed Virginia Democratic Congressman Bobby Scott of the alleged incident more than a year ago. An aide to the congressman told The Hill that Dr. Vanessa Tyson reached out to Scott 3 times, once in October, November, and December 2017, to express concerns about Fairfax's involvement in a Me Too moment. The aide alleges that Tyson did not disclose herself as the victim to Congressman Scott until late December or early January 2018. The aide also noted that Scott generally knew about the allegations roughly a year ago, but he learned the details of the alleged encounter between Tyson and Fairfax when they emerged last week. Fairfax was running for lieutenant governor at the time and was later inaugurated that January. In a statement to ABC News, Scott said that in part that Dr. Tyson deserves the opportunity to have her story heard. But Mike Barnicle, what about the adjudication? I mean, again, is this the court of public opinion? I understand there's going to be a lawsuit here, but what happens in this case where you have 2 people saying 2 completely different things, and the future of the state of Virginia and who's running it possibly riding on that?
Joe, there's so much going on in this story. The appendages to this story, Sam Stein got to it a bit. I mean, what's happened to the news media over the recent past, the need to feed online editions, the rush to get something out before 7 a.m. or 9 a.m. this morning, that sometimes has a detrimental effect on journalism. But what Willie spoke to, I think, is the key to this. In this day and age, this is an event that occurred 15 years ago, in the summer of 2004 in Boston, Massachusetts. And for a woman to come forward now and to risk exposure of her entire life, to risk humiliation in talking about this, you'd have to go with the woman. You know, I don't know what's going to happen in an investigation. Obviously,
Mike, let me just stop you right there.
Yep.
I mean, is that the standard? Is that the standard that journalists should hold? Or,
no,
I'm
talking about my own. I'm talking about my own.
We're pundits. So we were talking before about newsrooms. What's the standard newsrooms go with?
Joe, we are pundits, but we're also parents. We have children.
I know.
We have daughters.
Right. No, I understand. So you're speaking your opinion. We were talking more generally about a journalistic standard, but you're just saying, if you look at human nature, what does she have to gain by coming out now?
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
For sure. And I get that. I get that. I think the question is, I think, especially since lawyers are getting involved, that would be the best course, is to watch this play out in court. That is where we want it to go. That is where we should watch the facts play out. The question now is, because he is accused, should he step down? We have 2 other leaders in Virginia who admit to what they have done, and whether or not they should step down is now being figured out, and that will play out in the public spectrum, and that feels appropriate. Is it appropriate for this man to step down accused when he says he didn't do it?
If you believe that there has to be some kind of investigative process, and since technically this wouldn't be a crime, I'm not sure, Joe, you would know better than me because you're a lawyer, how does this actually play out in a legal context if it's not leading to a court proceeding, because no crime was committed here?
Well, no, she says she was assaulted.
But
so that
she said she was assaulted.
And would that end up
in crime?
And that would end up in the court in a trial.
Well, if they're both hiring lawyers,
but they're both hiring lawyers who will do the investigation.
Right? So I think logically, Mika, the logical thing to do would be is have an investigation before anyone steps down, because you don't want to have the punishment before the investigation.
You have to have the investigation
However,
first.
we are not living in a logical universe. We're living in a universe in which we've set, or Democrats, I should say, have set a certain political standards, which is you have to go.
By the
that
way,
was the standard.
by the way,
I'm not saying
maybe the standard was wrong. We talked to Claire McCaskill about it yesterday, and Mika was saying in real time during Kavanaugh, Democrats will pay for this. Mika was saying in America, we still have something called due process.
Correct.
Well, and Claire McCaskill said yesterday, damn right, and I did pay for it on the campaign trail.
And I think there are others who would privately say the same about Al Franken, for instance. There were many Democrats within the party who got very angry at Kirsten Gillibrand, for instance, about that. And just because it happened once or twice and everyone overreacted potentially doesn't mean that that is the new standard. We may now be coming back to a middle place where we're trying to reconcile how we also allow due process, whether it's in the court system or whether it's in terms of just getting the stories out. But the journalists in this case are not, they are not, criminal investigators. They are not just, they didn't have the information to run with the story, but that doesn't mean that it can't be investigated by professionals in a timely manner.
After first refusing to weigh in, Senator and presidential hopeful Cory Booker told CNN yesterday, quote, "This is a deeply disturbing allegation that should be thoroughly investigated." Democratic Congresswoman Jennifer Wexton of Virginia also responded, tweeting, quote, "I believe Dr. Vanessa Tyson." Reverend Al Sharpton, what do you think?
I think I'm closer to you, Mika. I think that we've got to have a balanced view. This woman should be respected and heard, but he should be able to defend himself. And I think that we must look at this in that context. But in terms of the governor and secretary of state and blackface, there is nothing to investigate there.
Correct.
They said they did it. And I think that we shouldn't confuse the two issues. The governor said, I did blackface on Michael Jackson. There's nothing to investigate. He said it. The Secretary of State said, I did something wrong putting blackface on Curtis Blow. There's nothing to investigate. There are people with different stories in the lieutenant governor race. I'm on my way to Virginia to deal with the fact that there are 2 people who convicted themselves. What is the racial standard going to be? Why we have to and need to and must deal with what is the standard around sexual assaults and sexual harassment.
All right, Reverend Al Sharpton, thank you so much, and please report back to us about what you learn in Virginia. And let us know if it's true that some Virginians are actually asking West Virginia to take them back.
It's the top of the hour.
It's the top of the hour. We blew through a couple of breaks.
Sorry, Alex.
Sorry, Alex. Sorry, Phil. Sorry,
do you need to do
Comcast
any
Inc. Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.